Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to our continuing CPD series. This time, it's all about what's under the radar with Buddleia and Bamboo. I'm your host, Andy Ferguson, and joining me on today is Regional Manager of the Knotweed Company, but also a key member of the Invasive Weeds Committee for all your conferences for the past couple of years, Jim Glaister. Morning, Jim.
Good morning.
How are you, good sir?
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm almost awake, so that's good enough.
Well, I feel the same as you at the moment in time. I'm a wee bit sleepy-headed. So, folks, I will say forgive us if we're a wee bit doty. That's a Scottish word for you, doty this morning. But anyway, guys, if you are one of our regular listeners, a big thanks for tuning in. If you are a new listener, then a big welcome to you. We do hope you get some really good valued learning from today and also that you enjoy the chat. Now, guys, just some housekeeping things this morning. We are always really keen to chat away to yourselves to get engagement from yourselves. Even for you just to say hello and a good morning and tell us what you're up to. Now, for you to be able to do that, the first place I want to point you over to is firstly the chat functionality. Now, if you are on a desktop or laptop, the chat functionality should, depending on your settings, either be just to the left or to the right of you. All you simply need to do is just go to the chat functionality. There will be a box just at the bottom that says type your comment and type away, say a big hello to us. If you are on a mobile device that you have the same functionality, all you simply need to do is if you just pull up the screen just a little bit, just pull it up and you will see that chat functionality in there. Just feel free to kind of type away. I can see that there's people already saying good morning to us this morning. A good morning all, and many thanks for kind of joining us. There is all other ways in which you guys can also engage with us and throw your questions over to us. You can always email your question over to myself and I can post it to Jim just at the end of the webinar. And that's just simply andy@property-care.org. That's andy@property-care.org. Or if you are so socially savvy, you can go via our social media channels. Either go on via LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. Use the search functionalities that are native to those particular platforms. Simply type in Property Care Association and we should pop up and just do whatever you generally do to kind of tag and say hello. We will pick it up here. So yeah, please get socially savvy. Just before I jump on just to chat to Jim, just something I just want to make people aware. We are aware at 9 o'clock, everyone's kind of starting work. Sometimes the internet doesn't quite play ball with everyone and signals don't play ball. I just want to say that if you are joining us and something goes wrong from your side, there's a sound connection or there might be a disconnection anyway, there will be on your screen the ability to be able to reconnect for yourself. Just if you simply just hit that reconnect button, you should really just it should simply work. That you should just come back with us. But I think we all know what technology is like, and Sod's Law, that won't be the case, won't it? So we still have a couple of minutes until we start our main CPD. Just while I suppose we're killing time, Jim. I have to say, I'm a bit gutted. I have to say, I'm a bit gutted. I mean, folks, just to kind of let you know, Jim and we are actually part of a committee that we, with a bunch of others, that we all work together in order to kind of pull together the Invasive Weeds Conference. And I know there's several of our committee members on there. So a big hello to everyone that's out there. And I have to say, I mean, we've been spending a lot of time and a lot of effort pulling it all together, and we just had to pull under the whole rug pulled from under us, didn't we, Jim?
Well, hopefully we can get all the same people back next year. But yeah, we had a good program this year. But this would have been the fourth year that it's what it is. So hopefully we'll be able to transfer it reasonably intact to next year.
Well, I do hope so. I really do. I mean, the bottom line is it couldn't be helped. I mean, first and foremost, we have to make sure everyone is safe and there's no risk to anyone, especially in these uncertain times at the moment in time. And we're still, I suppose, trying to figure out what the new normal is going to be. And I certainly don't know what the new normal is going to be from a conference point of view. But hopefully, crossing fingers, we can kind of carry that on for certainly next year, conference-wise, and all that good work. I mean, because I actually felt we were almost there. Do you know?
Yeah, we were. We'd pretty much finalised it. We'd there, and then it all went
bugger up, didn't it? Yeah,
it's what it is.
Yeah, it is what it is.
So I think the issues are bigger than we are, so I think we just have to go along with them.
Yes. Oh, I heard, by the way, and I'm conscious of time here, but I heard from a little birdie on in my office that you're an accomplished actor. Is that right?
Well, it depends how you define accomplished. I do acting. My degree, believe it or not, was in drama, film, and television. So it's obvious I'm going to go into invasive weeds. I've always been acting in sort of one respect or another. Not really got much in the way of professional roles, other than being stuck back in the background or something like that. So you won't really have seen me in anything. But, keep my hand in. So,
well, similar to yourself, I have been an actor for years myself. I've been one half of a comedy duo every Christmas, and that donkey loves me. Well, let's not go there. Yes, let's not go there. Anyway, folks, a big hello just to everyone. We are about to start a broadcast. If you're wondering who the two individuals are chatting away at the moment, I'm your host, Andy, and joining me this morning for his presentation all about Under the Radar, Buddleia and Bamboo is Jim Glaister. We are about to start. Just before we actually start, just to make you aware that if you do want to throw any questions our way, any chat or any just general chat, you can use our chat functionality, which if you're on a laptop, should be just to your left or your right hand side. If you're on a mobile, if you just push up the screen, you'll be able to see it there. Or alternatively, you can email any kind of questions or anything like that over to myself, just at andy@property-care.org. Well, Jim, I can see that we're actually bang on 9 o'clock on my clock. I suppose it's really now a case of kind of throwing it over to yourself, asking the question, Is Buddleia and Bamboo being overshadowed by Japanese knotweed? Is Buddleia and Bamboo more structurally damaging in the built environment? And should we, as individuals, surveyors and mortgage companies, be more concerned? Big questions, Jim. Over to yourself, good sir.
Okay. Yes. Thank you very much for listening. No, I shall go a little bit further into that. So yes, really what I want to talk about, it's particularly bamboo, but also Buddleia, is about the impact that they have on the built environment and how do we manage them. But I'm going to start off talking about Japanese knotweed because that's the one that most of us will be aware of, because it's worth looking at what the situation is with knotweed at the moment. You have mortgage lenders are concerned about knotweed and the impact that it has on the built environment. But as many of us know, many of the stories about knotweed are sensationalized. They are inaccurate. And this has led recently to a reevaluation of the impact it has and the response to it. Now, the facts are Japanese knotweed can damage the built environment. But usually it's by exacerbating an existing weakness, or by destabilizing, lifting paving slabs, block paving, that kind of thing. In very specific circumstances, knotweed can cause quite catastrophic damage to structures, but these are very specific circumstances. Usually if you've got knotweed growing in an enclosed space over a long period of time, or if somebody builds a new structure over the top of unremediated, well-established knotweed. Now, in those circumstances, the damage is not cosmetic. It is substantial, and it can be very expensive to rectify. And here's a couple of examples. On the left there, you can see that there was knotweed growing in the gap between a boundary wall and an outbuilding. As the knotweed got bigger and bigger and bigger, as sort of the crowns grew and the rhizomes grew, and as sort of the stems became so much more mature, there was pressure exerted on both sides of that gap. So inevitably, the weaker structure, which was the boundary wall, got weakened. It got sort of like pushed over, and then one winter storm, this happened. That obviously is not a cosmetic damage. That is something that's going to cost a lot of money to put right. And on the right-hand side, you can see that there was an extension to an office building that was built right on top of some mature knotweed. And the knotweed found a way back up. It came up through the gap between the party wall and the extension. It also found its way into the extension itself. And really, the only way that that can be remediated now is for that entire extension to be demolished and the knotweed to be remediated, and then the extension rebuilt. That's not cheap. Now, these are rare cases. And because of this, you have sort of a number of mortgage lenders and a number of sort of concerned parties have basically said, well, is our response to knotweed disproportionate, particularly in terms of structural damage? And it may be that, yes, Buddleia can cause more actual structural damage than knotweed, although knotweed does have an amenity impact, which is important not to understate. And also there's a higher financial cost, which we can go into a little bit later on. But there's this feeling of we need to downplay the response to knotweed. And for me, that sort of puts an elephant in the room, really, and there he is. And that's why I don't put elephants in rooms. Because for me, I feel that rather than downscaling our response to knotweed, we should be equally proportionate about other invasive species, and we should perhaps be upscaling our response to those. And bamboo and Buddleia are two very good examples. And if Buddleia is worse than knotweed in terms of structural damage, if bamboo has demonstrated it can present similar issues on sites as knotweed, then why aren't mortgage lenders more concerned about them? And that's what I'm going to be talking about. So let's start off with Buddleia. So there are around 100 species of Buddleia. Common Buddleia, Buddleia davidii, is the one that most people are familiar with. Came over from Japan, Western China, and as with most of these non-native invasive species, imported into the UK during the 19th century. Now, Buddleia is very hardy. It can tolerate almost everything except full shade. Between September and October, it produces an abundance of large brown fruits. These split to produce seeds. You get about 50 to 100 seeds from each fruit. So that's an average of up to about 3 million seeds per plant once you've got, so like, you know, a well-established Buddleia plant. These are then distributed by the wind or along waterways. On average, Buddleia grows about 2.5 to 3 meters tall, spread about 1.5 to 3 meters wide, but it is variable. Larger sizes have been recorded. But if it's left uncontrolled, it dominates. And that's, you can often see this on derelict sites, as we've got on the left-hand picture there, which practically everything in that picture is Buddleia. But it can also happen in gardens. In the right-hand picture, that's a Buddleia in a residential garden that's just been left to its own devices and is now a tree. So let's touch on the butterfly bush, because this is the name that most people know Buddleia by. And I have an issue with that name because it suggests to people that Buddleia is very beneficial to the environment and very beneficial to butterflies. And this is not entirely true. Yes, it does provide an important source of nectar for adult butterflies, moths, and other insects, but it can't provide the rich variety of nectar that can be found on naturally occurring wildflowers, And really importantly, it doesn't provide food for caterpillars. You will never find caterpillars feeding on Buddleia. And part of the butterfly life cycle, it needs host plants for caterpillars to feed on. So where Buddleia dominates, important butterfly habitat is actually eliminated. And as Doug Tallamy of the University of Delaware quite sort of succinctly put it, when Buddleia is the only plant you grow for butterflies, you're not going to have butterflies anymore. So this has led to the Butterfly Conservation Trust back in 2012 issuing a position statement, which basically says, if it's somewhere where it's kept in control, where it's maintained, the dispersal of seeds is controlled, then they don't have a problem with it. But if it's unmanaged and it poses a risk to wildlife habitats, it shouldn't be planted. Now, Buddleia is responsible for more structural damage than Japanese knotweed, and this is because the seeds can grow in the smallest of cracks without any access to soil. Cabby produced a report 10 years ago, which estimated that Buddleia cost the British economy nearly $1 million a year, and I'm pretty sure it's over that now. It's particularly damaging to the railway network. It hinders maintenance, it damages infrastructure, it weakens bridges, interferes with overhead power lines, and it obscures signals. And the Non-Native Species Secretariat described the issues that it presents to the rail network as significant, which I think is a good understatement. So this is the kind of thing we've probably all seen. Buddleia growing out of structures, and you can see sort of the classic example, that the bottom right and top right, a well-established Buddleia growing out the top of a wall there, and over on the bottom left-hand corner there, you can see it growing actually out between the bricks in a wall. My favourite one is up the top there, which is a little bit of Buddleia. It's a Buddleia seedling growing in the supportive buttress of a medieval cathedral. So I'm sure that's not going to cause any problems. But this is only half the story. It's what's happening inside these structures that is actually the most alarming. And when you see that, that really brings the issue home. And I would like to thank Neil Strong of Network Rail for letting me have these pictures. So you can see the size of the root there that has established inside this wall. And you may or may not be able to make out, but the vertical crack underneath the very large root has got a section of root going into the top of the crack and then coming back out again at the bottom of the crack. So that root has created a significant weakness in that wall. It is also, as you can see, has completely distorted the top of the wall. So the only way that can be dealt with is dismantling the wall and rebuilding it. Because it's going to be too weak, and it's going to, over time, it's just going to be structurally compromised. So what can we do about Buddleia? Before I start talking about the treatment of Buddleia, I'm just going to make a little note on herbicide choice, because I'm going to be talking about herbicide for both Buddleia and bamboo. They can both be treated using an amenity glyphosate, and lots of people are happy to do that, but there's lots of people also will say, oh, but why do we always use glyphosate? Why can't we use something else? Why can't we use this? Why can't we use that? And yes, there are other things that can be used, but it's important to remember what's stated in the Code of Practice for using plant protection products, which basically says that you need to use something in line with its approved conditions of use, and it's an intended use and situation. So, for example, Garland and Icade are popular tricloper products. They have label approval for use on Japanese knotweed and Buddleia, but they're classed as industrial, not amenity herbicides. So that means you can't use them in a garden. They have label approval for use on amenity grasslands and industrial areas, not in residential areas. They're not approved for use near water or in groundwater sensitive areas. And Garland, in particular, has label approval for application by tractor mounted sprayer, but not for via a knapsack. So my argument is, given the restrictions of other products and given the effectiveness of glyphosate on these two plants, why not just use the safer product that provides more flexibility? So whenever I talk about herbicide treatment programs during the course of this webinar, I will be assuming that an amenity glyphosate is being used. So let's get straight on to controlling Buddleia with herbicide. It's a hardy plant, it's a woody plant. So a lot of people might think, well, glyphosate isn't really appropriate for a woody plant, but it provides an abundance of leaves, and those leaves are very susceptible to glyphosate use. A single application on a small infestation of Buddleia, where you've got a single plant, you might kill it off with a single application, but always recommend doing sort of follow-up monitoring just in case. The important thing is staying vigilant for new seed growth. So if you've got any new seedlings appear, you need to treat them fairly early on to prevent them establishing. If you don't want to get rid of your Buddleia, you just want to control it. Cutting it back achieves very little in the short term, but it will keep it managed. But if you continually prevent the leaves establishing, you can eventually kill the plant. The important thing, if you want to live in harmony with your Buddleia, is pruning the flower heads in the autumn as the flowers die off, therefore preventing the production of the fruits, therefore preventing the production of the seeds. And that's the important thing. You want to live in harmony with your Buddleia, control the seeds. You want to get rid of it completely. Treating it with herbicides is always a good idea because you kill most, if not all of it off. And once Buddleia is in a weakened or indeed completely dead state, the branches and trunks are quite brittle, easily removed from the ground. Roots are sort of reasonably shallow. Where you've got a problem is, as we saw earlier, if Buddleia is growing within a wall or another structure. You can kill it off by treating the visible part of the plant, but the root is still going to be within that structure. So then you have a choice. So if the root's not developed enough to cause any structural concerns, then it might be quite appropriate to just cut it off. You can sort of stump treat just to be absolutely sure, seal the hole up, leave the root inside, and it shouldn't really be doing anything. But if there are structural concerns, there are no shortcuts. You're going to have to take the wall apart. In which case, you definitely need a structural engineer to be involved. This is really the kind of the advice in terms of smaller areas of Buddleia. If you're looking at larger areas of Buddleia, if you've got sort of derelict site that's just completely covered in Buddleia, then you've just got to be aware that that's going to be quite labor intensive because you've got a lot of Buddleia to get around, and that's a lot of spraying. So let's move away from Buddleia and let's talk about bamboo. So there are at least 1,000 species of bamboo. Nobody seems to be able to agree exactly how many there are, but there are at least 1,000. It's been claimed bamboo is the fastest growing woody plant in the world. It's a perennial evergreen, mostly. And it's a member of the grass family. It has a hollow jointed stem, which is referred to as a culm, and it grows from rhizome. It's capable of generating new growth from rhizome fragments. And already, those of us familiar with Japanese knotweed are starting to see some similarities there. It rarely flowers. In many bamboos, the interval between flowering can be decades. And there's one extreme example there of Japanese timber, which takes 130 years before it flowers. There are some species that flower annually, but they're rare. And the length of the flowering cycle means that bamboo doesn't produce seeds very often. So that's not a means of spreading that we need to worry about too much in the UK. Many of the bamboo species will die off after they flower, though there are some that will survive flowering. They'll be temporarily weakened and then will eventually recover. So bamboo can be divided into two categories, really, which is defined by their type of rhizome. The colloquial names for them, which actually describe them very well, is clumpers and runners. And the two drawings there are of the two different rhizome structures. On the left, you have a clumping bamboo, and on the right, you have a running bamboo. So I think it's fairly obvious from the drawings there how they got their name. So the clumping bamboos, or pachymophs if you want to be technically accurate, the rhizome grows only short distances and it immediately curves upwards. You've got culms grow directly from the tip of the rhizome. The rhizomes are typically quite thick. In mature plants, the concentrations of stems can be very dense, as you can see from the picture there on the right. Running bamboos, or leptomorph, are highly invasive. Some species can be very, very invasive. Rhizome is typically thin in appearance. It's jointed. It can reach considerable lengths depending on the species. Some species can produce rhizome growth of up to 6 meters per growing season. It's not quite so common. Usually you're talking about 1.5 meters during the growing season, but it does vary. New culms can emerge from buds from anywhere along the rhizome. So the culms grow during spring, early summer. They reach their full height within 2 to 3 months of emerging from the rhizome. And then interestingly, they will not grow any higher in subsequent seasons. So whatever height a culm gets to in the first season of growth, that's it. It stays at that height until later stems come up and gradually sort of increase the height, which I think is on the next slide. So maybe I shouldn't have mentioned that yet. Late summer to early autumn, the rhizome mass expands. So you've got spring, early summer, it goes up, and then late summer, early autumn, that's when under the ground it goes out. So every year, new culms are produced, which then grow taller than the existing ones, which is how it sort of increases its height over time. Culms become woodier as they age, consequently lose some of their color. You can see in the photograph on the right there, several different colors of culms. The ones that are quite a strong green will be fresh culms. The ones that are a bit more yellowy green will be older. And culms typically live for about 10 years. So older plants tend to grow at a faster rate than newer ones. Height and rhizome spread is dependent on several factors, as with most plants. As an example, ideal conditions, clumping species such as Fargesia can grow 30 centimeters to 1 meter in height per year on average. While a running species like Philostachys can achieve growth of 1 to 2 meters height per year. Now, most running bamboos quickly dominate the area they're planted in. They cause significant shading issues, as you can see from that photograph. All of the bamboo there, it's almost up to the height of the telegraph pole. You can see it's completely shaded over the bungalow to the left, and it's pretty much reached up to the roof height of the two-story house behind. Interestingly, if you are stuck with a neighbor who has planted a bamboo hedge and it has got to that sort of height, high hedges legislation isn't going to help you because it's a grass. So it's not covered by high hedges legislation. Rhizomes are strong. They're not easily broken. I'm partially obscuring the picture on the right there. But what that picture is it was during sort of an excavation we did a couple of years ago. We had the mini digger pulled out the end of the rhizome and then extended to the height of the bucket, and all of that rhizome stayed intact, and it's still actually connected in the ground. So that's just one great big long strip of branched rhizome, and nothing was snapping. That just gives you some idea how strong it is, and also what sort of length they can get to. But they're naturally shallow. They're usually found no more than about 30 centimeters deep. Many are visible above the ground, particularly in running species. So you get, like in the bottom left picture there, where you will get aerial rhizomes will appear for a stretch and then disappear back into the ground again. The rhizome mass, although it's quite shallow, it can be extremely dense. Now, rhizome grows fast. And with running species, it can, as we said, it can be found up to 6 meters in length, depending on species and conditions. It ruins lawns, it ruins paving, decking, tarmac, spreads into adjoining properties. Then you have neighbor disputes, and then you have potential legal action. And some species can actually spread the entire width of domestic gardens. Now, I'm sure a lot of those problems there, again, people who are familiar with Japanese knotweed are thinking, yeah, a lot of those sound very familiar. But just to give an example of the lengths that some species of bamboo can produce rhizome, the right-hand picture there, you can see the bamboo, which is sort of growing in a neighbour's garden, and you can see the length of the pathway that's by the side of the house. What you can't see, because my picture is over it, is the end of that path. Actually, beyond the corner of the wall that you can see, sort of where the ivy's growing over it, the end paving slab has been removed, which is the photograph on the left. And you can see that rhizome is still going. It's coming off into the tarmac. It's undermining the tarmac, cracking the tarmac. And so if you get some idea that that piece of rhizome is about where my eyes are right now. And if you look at the distance between that and where the bamboo is next door, that gives you some idea of the lengths that rhizome can spread to. If bamboo finds insufficient nutrients in the shallows, it can be found deeper, usually up to a depth of about 1 meter, if it needs to go in search of water. Bamboo roots, as you can see from that picture, they're thin, fibrous. They can be found at a depth of up to about 1 meter as well. And bamboo rhizomes interact destructively with the built environment, as we've suggested with the previous picture, but here's a few more examples. It can lift paving, as you can see in the top left picture there. It can distort or penetrate soft or decaying tarmac, as you can see in the main bottom picture there. Penetrates walls, providing there's a point of access available. Again, this is all very familiar to people who understand the issues that are caused by Japanese knotweed. So if a running bamboo is planted along a fence line and it's not properly contained, then immediately you've got neighbour issues, because it's going to spread into the adjacent property. Suddenly the neighbour's got a bamboo grove they don't want, and that's going to cause a certain amount of friction. So here's just a few pictures to give you some idea what bamboo is capable of. So the top picture, that's bamboo that's just left to its own devices over time. And again, a lot of people are probably already looking at that picture and thinking that looks quite similar to a large, well-established standard Japanese knotweed. You've got culms emerging, the two left-hand pictures at the bottom there. And the right-hand bottom corner, you've got bamboo coming up through tarmac. And the picture bottom middle that looks like it came out of an alien film is the base of some culms and stretch of running rhizome. A few more pictures. So you can see on the left-hand picture there, the impact that the bamboo, which is growing on both sides of that wall, has had on the wall. Though those of you who are familiar with proper building techniques will also recognize that that wall was built with an inherent flaw in it. So it's probably no surprise that this has happened. The top middle picture is really to give an indication of just how dense rhizome material can be at the base of bamboo plants. And the other thing about running bamboo is at least you can find out where the rhizomes are, because the culms will emerge all the way along it, and quite often you will have culms emerging in almost straight lines, as you can see in the right-hand picture, as you can see in the bottom middle picture. Now, this is where it gets interesting. So if I draw your attention to the left-hand photo, this was an excavation we did of bamboo from a front garden, and we'd already excavated all of the bottom half of that picture. And we had rhizomes which were growing right up at the front of the house. And before removing them, we then discovered in the circled area is the right-hand picture, that we had rhizome that was actually penetrating the front wall of the house. What we don't know is whether that hole was there and the bamboo just went through it, or whether the mortar was weakened and the bamboo pushed the mortar aside, or whether the bamboo having very, very strong rhizomes, much, much stronger than Japanese knotweed rhizomes, whether that bamboo actually made that hole. What we do know is that we couldn't pull that rhizome out of that hole. So quite clearly the bamboo had got into the cavity and had branched. So it was acting pretty much like a grappling hook. So all we could do at that stage was just cut that off, stump treat it, and then we're just keeping an eye on it and see whether it's going to emerge in subsequent years. And if so, then we'll be able to treat it again. But that's an area for investigation. We have had a number of examples of bamboo getting inside houses, into cavities, under floors. Usually, if there is an access point, in pretty much the same way as Japanese knotweed. But what we don't know is whether bamboo can actually make those access points. So that might be something that, for more investigation, we certainly need more data on it. So if you've got bamboo, what do you do about it? Well, manual control or containment. Bamboo can be maintained if you regularly thin out the culms, maintain it to a suitable height. If you keep it at a suitable height, it's not going to have the expansion of rhizomes because it hasn't got so much height to support that it needs more rhizomes. A lot of people think that bamboo, you can just stick it in a container, or you can stick in a bit of root barrier and job done, and you don't really need to look at it anymore. It's important to know bamboo can be quite difficult to contain. Running bamboos in particular are very capable of escaping containment because of the aerial nature of a lot of the rhizomes. It can simply just grow over the top of the planter or grow over the top of the root barrier and then establish and then keep going. So if you're going to have bamboo, by all means, put some form of containment there, but you also need to maintain it. You also need to monitor it. Otherwise, it can escape and then cause further problems. Herbicide control, just going back to what I was saying before about the use of glyphosate, bamboo is a grass. Glyphosate works brilliantly on it. It requires the same considerations as Japanese knotweed, really, when you start drawing up a treatment program. Early summer to early autumn, when the bamboo is expanding its rhizome system, it's a very effective time to apply the herbicide. You're going to need extended lances, especially on mature bamboo, especially on mature running bamboo, because it's going to be towering over your head. As per knotweed, a winter visit is a good idea. Cutting down the culms is a very good idea. Makes things sort of a lot more manageable. But as most bamboos are evergreen, it's still alive or still active during the winter. So this is actually a good opportunity for a further herbicide treatment. And what we've found is that cutting down the culms during the winter and then treating cut stumps can prove very effective. And my colleague Brian Taylor, who's in the photo there, sort of pioneered this means of using a Japanese knotweed stem injector gun, but without using the needle. But if you are going to be doing something like that, then it's very important to use a tracer die, because as you can see, just with the sheer, how many stems you've got there and how dense the stems are, you're going to very quickly lose track as to which stems you've treated and which you haven't. So tracer die helps. Standard treatment programs for mature bamboo cover an area about 10 to 15 square meters. You're going to be talking 3 to 6 years, just as with Japanese knotweed. Species with extensive running rhizomes, particularly if they're well established, they're going to require longer periods of treatment. And at least 2 years monitoring is always a good thing to build in, because bamboo responds in the same way as knotweed to sort of herbicide treatment. In some ways, you can get dormancy. You certainly get stunted bonsai growth. So, typical treatment program. So, summer, early autumn, year one, foliar herbicide treatment. 1 or 2 applications depending on the size of the infestation. For most cases, you probably only need to do 1. During the winter, cut the culms, stem inject the culms, and then the summer, 1 or 2 visits, again, depending on how large an area you're talking about. By the time you get to year 3, you should just be down to single visits to spot treat. And similarly with year 4. Something that you can do if you want to see how the treatment program is going, particularly if you're not seeing any regrowth, is you can actually hand dig some of the sort of like close to surface rhizomes. If they're green, there's still a lot of life in them. If they're brown and woody, then you know you've killed those bits of rhizome off. So that's a good way of checking how things are going. And consider the program completed when there's been no new growth for 2 consecutive seasons, as with Japanese knotweed. If you can't find any green rhizomes, then it's a pretty good bet that you can say, okay, I'm going to sign that off. So just to give you a case study, this was a job that we began in 2015. So this is what the bamboo looked like, year 1. You can see lots of new culms coming up there. You can see it all the way through that hedge. In the beginning of year 2, in February, we cut the culms down, and you can see that there's still quite a lot of live growth on those culms because it's an evergreen, it's still going. And the right-hand picture, you can see the visit that we did in the August in year 2, and this was the kind of regrowth that we've got. So this is popping up from rhizomes. After the stem injection that we did during the cutting of the culms, we did not have any more growth has come up since in the main area of the plant. It's all been sort of coming up from rhizomes. And I talked about bonsai growth. You can see the bottom right circled bit there. You can see how bonsai that is. Year 3, we've got some bits popping up. You can very clearly see it's along a rhizome. You can see the 3 circles there in a straight line. So these are sort of, and the main area of the bamboo plant is sort of like where the bare area wall is. And then year 4, we only had 1 bit of regrowth. And that was at an extent of rhizome, sort of like a good distance away from the main part of the plant. Year 5, which was last year, we've had no growth. So I'll be going back this year to check, and if we've got no growth this year, then we'll be signing that off. So if you want to actually remove bamboo, I mean, small infestations can be dug out, but be aware it's pretty hard work. Clumping bamboos are easier to hand dig than running bamboos because the rhizomes are more contained, but rhizomes are tough in most species. They don't snap easily. There are a few species that are more susceptible to snapping rhizomes, but they actually create the highest risk of leaving a regenerative rhizome fragment in the ground, and then the bamboo comes back. But if you're going to be getting rid of a well-established running bamboo, use a mechanical excavator. Your staff will definitely thank you for using a mechanical excavator because it's going to be backbreaking work otherwise. You can see from those pictures on the right just how dense everything is. I mean, the bottom right-hand picture, that's all the rhizomes exposed after the topsoil had been taken away. And that's a lot of material, very strong material to dig through. So it will take a lot of time, a lot of labor. If you're hand digging, excavations is a bit easier. It's still going to take a bit of time. But it's worth noting that at present, bamboos are not subject to any waste regulations. They can be disposed of as standard vegetative waste, which is an issue in itself, really, given that the rhizomes have the same regenerative properties as Japanese knotweed. So in summary, Buddleia and Bamboo, they're both very susceptible to herbicide control, although Buddleia roots within structures need to be removed manually unless you don't need to move them. Buddleia can be killed with just 1 or 2 applications. Bamboo needs a full treatment program as per Japanese knotweed. Buddleia and Bamboo can be treated throughout their growing seasons, and most bamboos are still active during the winter, so you've got a longer growing season. The key to effective control or eradication of Buddleia is to implement measures before the plant produces seeds. That's a really important thing. And neither Buddleia nor bamboo is subject to any waste disposal restrictions at this time. So if we just do a comparison, go back to where we started talking about Japanese knotweed, and we're aware of the response to Japanese knotweed, and there's this feeling that we need to make sure that the response to Japanese knotweed is proportionate. Well, coming back to my point, surely the response to bamboo and buddleia should also be proportionate, because they're all invasive. They all, to some degree, cause damage to structures. Buddleia is more likely to cause damage to buildings. Knotweed and bamboo are more likely to exacerbate issues in buildings. Although there is this question mark over bamboo, whether it can actually be more damaging to a building than knotweed, but that's unproven. But certainly in terms of walls, pavements, non-building structures, they all can cause multiple issues. You have bamboo and knotweed spread by regenerative rhizomes. You have buddleia spreading by seeds. Seeds, not a problem for Japanese knotweed in the UK. Seeds, rarely a problem for bamboo in the UK. Do they have a detrimental effect on biodiversity? Yes, all of them do. Is the sale and disposal restricted by law? Japanese knotweed, yes. Bamboo and buddleia, no, which makes no sense, particularly in terms of highly invasive bamboo. So the really sort of strong running bamboo, people are still buying that in garden centres and planting it in their gardens, and it's just causing no end of issues. There's long been a question of whether buddleia and now bamboo should be on Schedule 9. My feeling is yes, but whether that's ever going to happen, whether we're ever going to see some of the more invasive species of bamboo on Schedule 9, I don't know. So the situation we have right now is the mortgage lenders are very concerned about Japanese knotweed. So in these two examples, we have small areas of Japanese knotweed that's just within 7 meters of the back of the house. These particular knotweed plants are not going to cause any structural issues whatsoever. They will cause amenity issues, amenity use issues, particularly the one on the right, because in order to deal with that knotweed, the people who live in that house are going to have part of their lawn they can't mow, and that's going to make their garden look ugly, and it's going to involve the use of their garden. And that's where the issue of Japanese knotweed really lies. It's not in structural problems, it's in the lack of loss of amenity use and the expense of disposing of it. But mortgage lenders are very concerned about this, when actually, as far as the structure is concerned, these will not be causing any issue, and have no concern about that. On the left-hand side, that bamboo is everything in the front garden is bamboo. And that actually is the site where the photograph of the rhizome penetrating the front wall of the house was taken. On the right-hand side there, you've got some buddleia, which has been subject to some maintenance. You can see there's a cut stump on the left-hand side there. But if that is not being maintained to prevent seed production, then you're going to have buddleia in all of the surrounding gardens, and probably in some of the surrounding houses, perhaps even on this house, you could have buddleia growing out of cracks in walls, growing out of gutters, growing out of ceilings, growing out of drains, and then you've got all sorts of issues. And so it doesn't really make a lot of sense that mortgage lenders want to know everything about these properties, but nothing about those properties. So really, in an ideal world, I would love to see us all as an industry, and indeed the PCA as a trade body, to help educate mortgage lenders on the issues of buddleia and bamboo, encourage legislators to introduce restrictions in regard to their sale and disposal, definitely in the case of bamboo, educate the public on the dangers of planting these species in their gardens, educate clients to take bamboo and buddleia seriously and not ignore them, and to try and get the media on board of this to change the perspective on these plants. Now, if we can do that, not only are we providing a more proportionate response to invasive species other than Japanese knotweed, but also those of us that are working in this industry, it provides new commercial opportunities, which we should embrace. So in terms of maintenance reference sources, just sort of like if it's helpful, the PCA have got a book out, you may be aware of it, Practical Management of Invasive Non-Native Weeds in Britain and Ireland. Title just trips off the tongue. And that's available. It has sort of a lot of information on a lot of non-native species, including bamboo and Buddleia. If you want something more detailed about bamboo, then there is a book that's actually going to be published sometime between now and October. I know this because I'm co-writing it, which will be the Bamboo Guide, written by Brian Taylor and myself. It will be published by Packard Publishing as soon as Brian and I finish writing it, which should hopefully be in the next few weeks. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was a little plug, and so is this. So I'm all done. So thank you very much. And back to Andy for any questions.
Yes, and thanks for that little plug. Well, here, Jim, many thanks for that. I mean, I had no idea. Certainly, there was about 100 species of bamboo, and I certainly didn't appreciate that bamboo would be responsible for more damage than Japanese knotweed. And I appreciate that there's maybe a debate out there, and some people might hung drawn and quarter you for maybe kind of saying that. But if you do, audience, if you are out there and you do disagree, we are here keen to hear those points as well. So feel free to kind of shout out. And certainly for all the butterfly lovers out there, if you are planting Buddleia in order to try and get butterflies, well, you heard it from Jim yourself, you're not going to get very many butterflies. So you have heard it. But guys, we're at that time now where we're at questions. Many thanks to everyone that's been emailing in your questions and posing your questions via the chat functionality. I think starting off first, a question from Robert Horn. Are there any insects or animals that are known predators for Buddleia? Now, I will say this, Jim, and I appreciate you might not be privy to this, but there has been the conversation here about an invasion of pandas coming across and debates and whether or not that's sensitive or not. So just to give you a wee heads up there.
Okay. Well, this is not my specialist area, obviously, but as far as I'm aware, I've not been made aware of any natural predators for Buddleia or bamboo in this country. So I don't think so, though an entomologist will probably be able to answer that much better than I can. I've certainly not seen any evidence of leaf damage or anything else. So my belief at the moment is no, but I'm happy to be updated with further information from somebody who knows more on that.
Yeah, and guys, we don't pretend to know all the answers. I mean, this is the whole point of having the chat functionality. So if you do feel that you've got some value here to kind of throw into the mix, then please do kind of shout it out, use the chat functionality, and we're happy to kind of take away that extra knowledge as well, both myself and Jim. Moving on to the next question from Richard News. Do you believe we have a duty to report either species on a property, a species on a property which has been, sorry, I'll start that sentence again. My apologies, Richard. But do you believe that we have a duty of care to report when we actually see invasive species on properties other than Japanese knotweed?
Yeah. Hi, Richard. Yeah. Well, if we're doing a survey, and it's like a Japanese knotweed survey, if we see something else that we think the client needs to be aware of, that they need to know is a problem, or if it's a Schedule 9 plant, then yeah, we should be bringing that to the client's attention and offering them a solution. And if they decide not to take it, they decide not to take it. But I think, yes, we do have a duty of care to bring that to their attention.
Yeah, Jim, just in case there is people out there, and I doubt there is, but just in case there's people out there that don't actually know what Schedule 9 is, can you just very briefly just tell them what Schedule 9 is?
Wildlife and Countryside Act 1981. It's Schedule 9 is a list of species where it is, as far as the plant species is concerned, where it is illegal to plant or allowed to grow in the wild. Now, that's a very woolly statement. There's a lot of debate as to exactly what is the wild and what isn't the wild. But basically, if a plant is on Schedule 9, then it's restricted in sale, it's restricted in planting. In fact, in many ways, it's forbidden from being planted. And so a number of our most invasive species are on Schedule 9, but some are sadly missing. I mean, you know, there's been an opportunity to put Buddleia on there for a long time. It's never happened. Bamboo certainly is something that needs to be thought about in the next revision, but there's, you know, there seems to be some resistance to that. You've got Japanese knotweed, you've got giant knotweed, you've got hybrid knotweed, but Himalayan knotweed is not on Schedule 9, which again doesn't really make a lot of sense. Yeah, so that's what Schedule 9 is.
Okay. Well, I've got next question coming up. What I've done is I've kind of, just because of the amount of questions now that were coming in, I've kind of combined this question both from Stephen Clark, who emailed it in, and from Daniel Chetnam. Question is, thanks to the work of others, and I think principally, I think the name jumps out here would probably be Dr. Dan Jones here. We know that the best time to treat knotweed is in the autumn. Do we actually have any studies on the best time to treat things like marsetail and bamboo? And also, just to kind of follow on from that, is generally the latter part of the season the best time to treat invasive weeds?
Depends on the invasive weeds. Giant hogweed, you want to get in early in the season on that rather than late in the season. And something like Himalayan balsam, you probably want to get at the early part of the season rather than later in the season, because you want to get it before it produces seeds. So it varies from plant to plant. In terms of, there aren't really sort of studies on bamboo, I don't think. Certainly not ones that I've come across yet. We could certainly do with some. Really what I've presented today is what we have as a company have come up with from our own experience. And we found that a similar kind of program to Japanese knotweed is quite effective on bamboo. But somebody like Dan decides to do a proper study on it, he might find things are slightly different to what we are aware of right now. But we know we get a good result on that. It's all from sort of site experience rather than an actual proper study. And I would welcome a proper study, particularly on bamboo treatment, to make sure that what we're doing is correct.
Well, do you know, that's maybe something that, from a PC point of view, that we can maybe kind of look into. And guys, if you are aware of studies out there, we've just not tripped across them, please do let us know. Question now. Next question actually comes from a Mr. Anonymous, and I think I know why, because it's a controversial question. So prepare to get the. I don't know the right term to use. You can just tell I've not enough coffee. But Buddleia is known in the industry, saying here, as a woody plant, slow growing compared to Japanese knotweed or bamboo. Should we really be classing this as invasive? Over to yourself, Jim.
I refer you back to the photograph of the derelict site, which was all Buddleia. That looks pretty invasive to me. Buddleia, if it's controlled, you know, you can live in harmony with your Buddleia. You can have Buddleia in your garden as long as you've got other plants in your garden that also attract sort of pollinating species, and the Buddleia isn't actually preventing them from being pollinated. Then there's no reason why you can't live in harmony with Buddleia if it's controlled. But if Buddleia is left to its own devices, then yes, it's very invasive, because those seeds can spread over a large area. They can grow practically anywhere. And if you've got a derelict site, and we've seen it everywhere, every single time, you go around, how many times have we gone on to sites which are scheduled for redevelopment, and practically everything you can see is Buddleia. So that's pretty invasive. That's what happens if it's not controlled. So that's the key to it. You need to control it. As with most plants, really, if you can control them, you can control their spread, then you can live with them, and that's fine. But if they get out of control, then they dominate. And there are actually sites. I think there's some down in the southeast where Buddleia has completely taken over a conservation area, to the extent where they've lost all the biodiversity. They have no butterflies. They have very few, sort of, in terms of insects, and it's taken over all of the plant species. And I think there's actually a large program going on right now to get rid of that Buddleia, to try and get some of the biodiversity back into the site. So yes, it can be highly invasive, but if you control it, then you can prevent it becoming invasive. But it's all about controlling the seed production.
Well, I suppose that runs nicely on to kind of my next question. Comes from John Bennett, and I think it really just cuts to making life simple. Why don't we just simply ban the selling of bamboo and Buddleia, not to help control it? I mean, why? Why?
Yeah. Or at least tell people, give some people some warnings. That would be nice. I mean, I've made no secret of the fact that I don't really have a great deal of respect for the advice given by Alan Titchmarsh on ground force back in the 90s, where he was planting bamboo screens everywhere. And this has resulted in a lot of people planting bamboo in their gardens in the 90s and the early 2000s. And because you use this phrase bamboo screen, people think it's a hedging plant. Nothing with rhizomes should ever be used as a hedging plant, because it spreads, and you stick it next to a boundary and it spreads beyond the boundary, and then that's it. You've then got a neighbor dispute. Yeah, it would be lovely if we actually had warnings, at least, and had people that were selling it who actually were trained to give proper advice on it. I mean, if I go back to the photograph of the house where we did the excavation of the bamboo, that slide towards the end there, where the entire front garden was bamboo. That bamboo was originally sold to the client about 15 years ago by a very reputable garden centre, and they were sold it as a, quote, non-invasive bamboo. But the reality is there's no such thing as a non-invasive bamboo. There are less invasive bamboos and more invasive bamboos, but there's no such thing as a non-invasive bamboo, because if you don't control them over time, they will all spread. Even the clumpers will spread over time. So yeah, it would be great if we actually had some restrictions, or at very least some warnings for the public, so they've got some idea what they're planting.
Well, James on chat, I'm with you. I actually think it is simply just to do with pound signs, and far too much money getting made that sign. And Stephen on chat, I'm again with you on the Derelicts and Exterminate. So if you're wondering what I'm talking about, guys, look at the chat. We're coming to, I've just got one or two more kind of questions. We actually have more questions here. Jim, what I'll do is I'll fire these questions over to you, and if you, I'm not going to promise anything, folks, but if Jim's able to get back to you, great. But next question, coming from the team from Titan. Morning, Team Titan. What is the anticipated design service life of a root barrier? Now, I reckon this is almost how long is a piece of string, because I suppose it really depends on the design and stuff. But Jim, I'm going to let you answer that rather than me pretend to answer it.
Yeah, it depends on the root barrier. Depends who's made it. Depends what they've made it for. I mean, a lot of the Japanese knotweed root barriers that we use, they have they should have at least a 25 to 50 year guarantee on them. If you're looking at using a root barrier for bamboo, the rhizomes are very woody. They're very hard, very strong, and they've got a bit of a point on the tip as well. So if you're going to use a root barrier, you need to make sure it's a really strong root barrier. If it's a really strong root barrier, then it should come with a sort of a guarantee period, but it's going to vary depending on who makes it. There are some people that make root barriers specifically for bamboo, whereas the root barriers that you get that are made for trees will also work on bamboo. It's just to make sure that they're strong enough. But the point that I made with root barriers is root barrier with a running bamboo is no defense, because the rhizome can just go over the top. So you need to sort of like keep track on it, really.
Okay. Well, guys, I think because we're just getting close to that time, I think what I'm going to have to do is just cut short on any questions. But as I've mentioned, folks, what I will do is I will forward on any questions we're not being able to have a chance to Jim, along with your details. And if Jim can, again, not promising, he will hopefully kind of get back to you. Just for those looking for any additional information, there is an invasive weed technical doc library that you can actually refer to that has a whole variety of guidance on different invasive weeds. The web link is up there. It's just simply www.property-care.org/invasive weed library. And you heard Jim allude to earlier on about 2 other books you can kind of reference as well. There's one that was compiled by the PCA, which as Jim said himself, the title just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? Practical Management of Invasive Non-Native Weeds in Britain and Ireland. And you saw how natural that came off my tongue there. And you heard from Jim as well. Jim is producing a book also, The Bamboo Guide, and I know that's coming out soon. And I know yourself, Jim, and Brian, have been putting in a lot of work to that. So my blessing there, and a big and good luck certainly just with the publishing, etc. But also, folks, just to also let you know, I am really chuffed to say that our training is going to be back up and running soon. It's on the 9th of June. I don't pretend to know exactly what training is going to be available. However, our training team is available. You can give them a wee call just on 01480 400 000, or contact my wonderful Jade on email there, just at jade@property-care.org. Just to let you know what's coming up next webinars wise, our next in our weekly CPD webinars next Thursday is all about the insect factor in wood decay, and that's being presented by Nicholas Donathorn. Now, we also have other webinars coming up after that. We are, with it being Mental Health Week this week, we are pulling together a CPD for your mind, I suppose, a wee bit. And so please do look out for that. We hopefully should have that coming up today. And we do have other webinars planned coming up. But for all to find out what we have available and also to watch what's on demand, the web link is there, www.property-care.org/webinars. Last but not least, I just want to say a big thank you to yourself, Jim. I mean, a great presentation, really informative. I certainly was not strong in my knowledge in terms of the other invasive weeds out for the Japanese knotweed, so it was certainly a nice learning curve for myself. So a big thank you to yourself. A big thank you to our audience as well for kind of tuning in. And I suppose it just really leaves me to say I hope everyone had some real good valued learning from today, and we hope you have a lovely rest of the day. So, and goodbye everyone from me, and goodbye from Jim, and take care.
Thanks, bye.